All right. Hello, everyone. We are super excited to have you for our third installment of the Swiss Re and Total Financial forums. I can just say over the past two ones of these have been incredibly successful. We've had a lot of conversation. Matter of fact, the one that we had a couple of weeks ago went longer, and so we actually scheduled a little bit longer. So if we go past an hour, we're good here. So kind of the same ground rules as we've had for the last two. This is a discussion for you folks, right? Swiss is really wanting to hear from each and every one of you about the process. And this one, I know Diana is incredibly hot on this topic for e-health records, but a quick intro. Of course, we have Diana, we have myself, we have Nicole, Mary, and Dan from Swiss will be doing the main parts of the presentation. But just again, the reminder that this session is for you folks on the phone to kind of hear what they have to say and then make some comments as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diana, and I know she's got a few words to say.
Just a few. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. You all are very important to us, and I just love the fact that you guys will all participate and have words to say about this. This subject has been coming up, I can't even tell you how often. If you remember, this pretty much started almost 2 years ago that we started talking about the fact that we were going to be able to be obtaining APS records electronically. And when we first introduced this, we started with the Human API was the first platform that came out. Since that time, there's been multiple platforms that have come out, and all the carriers are now using them. Total Financial uses them to obtain records, and we've had good experiences and we've had not so good experiences. The purpose of this call, as we drilled down through this, is to explain to you how this is being used, what the insurance companies are actually looking at when they get these electronic records, and how you are feeling about the experience and what you're doing with your clients to prepare them ahead of time about what they need to do in order to provide us these records, because this is the part that slows down your cases, and this is the part that you all hate. I don't want to give you a little secret that I just found out I can get Kaiser records faster, which just blew my mind yesterday, but it's true. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over to Nicole very quickly, because I think that there's going to be a lot of open discussion back and forth on this one.
Thank you.
So it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Dan, for advancing the slide. I'm going to talk to you about the types of electronic health records that are available. So we're going to start by talking a little bit around definition. We'll talk about where we come from, how we got here, how this is being used, why this is important. If you have quick questions and you're looking for, a little bit more elaboration around a definition of something, I'm happy for you to jump in and ask that question. I would say we have plenty of time at the end for open discussion. So if you have something really meaty and hearty that you want to talk about, you're welcome to drop it in the chat or hold it until we get to that place. So it's good to see some familiar faces from our first two sessions, and it's nice to meet any new joiners who I haven't spoken to before. I'm Nicole Myers. I lead underwriting propositions at Swiss Re. Our team is responsible for underwriting innovation, both within the organization on strategic projects, as well as helping lead carriers through innovative projects as well. So electronic health records sits squarely in our world. In a previous life, I launched the electronic health record program at MIB before joining Swiss Re to build the team that I lead today. So this is definitely something that I have lived and breathed for the last handful of years. And I know I am expecting lively conversation. So let's dive in. We actually use the term electronic health record wrong for starters, and that's okay. It's not something that is worth debating, but we as an industry are hitchhikers along on this bigger journey of electronic health records. And that journey is really being undertaken by the health space, by the healthcare space. And in order to expedite our processes, in order to save money, in order to underwrite better and have better views of clients, we made the decision a number of years ago to start to pull this type of data, this clinical health data or digital health data, into our world and figure out how we can get access to these systems. So what you see on the screen is really a number of different types of digital health data. We're going to talk very specifically around the data that, if we go to the next slide, Dan, we're going to talk very specifically around this data here. And even more specifically on the right-hand side of the screen, we're going to talk about what comes out of EHR software, how we get that through EHR aggregators, patient portal, and then health information exchanges. There are actually different types of data that we have access to, which get lumped under this electronic health record term that we use quite a bit in our space. And Dan, you can pop to the next slide. Really, when we think about this, we're flowing from left to right here. So EHR software, the actual installation of EHR software that providers are inputting information in, that is the source of truth, the ground truth for information about patients. And these other access points that we have as we move from left to right are how we're able to kind of tap into that information in order to bring it into underwriting. And each of these gives us a different view. Our aggregators all the way out on the right-hand side, MIB, Human API, Claretto, these may be terms that or companies that you've heard of. They are the aggregators that are trying to bring all of this information together, which is to this point been very disparate, and create single sources for us as an industry to tap into to access these records. So they're handling the build and connection to all of these different software providers. So EHR software, this is if you are in the office with your physician or your care provider and they are typing away on a laptop or into their computer, they are documenting what's going on with you directly into that software. If we look at this middle column, health information or HIE data is something that we're able to access. That is where those EHR software systems are exchanging information with each other through state-run health information exchanges. So these systems, and we'll talk about the history of how they were formed, these systems needed to be able to communicate with each other. If I get injured, I just moved to Chicago. If I get injured, 40 miles outside of the city, that doctor is going to want to be able to pull my records, can tap into a health information exchange, depending on the way Illinois has structured it, and would be able to search for me and then pull down my history. This, as you can imagine, was quite helpful, has been quite helpful with things like prescription drugs, right? Knowing that an individual might be floating from hospital to try and get their hands on painkillers, those types of things. So that's a state-run. Those are state-run, and those are access points for us that aggregators can tap into to derive records. Patient portals. So Diana mentioned Human API. They were the leader in patient portal. There are other patient portal access points. MIB has an access point through Cerner. These require an individual to put in their username and password. They also require the physician to offer a patient portal to their actual client in order for us to tap into those. And essentially, the aggregator is then scraping that information and providing us that information as a record. We're going to take a look at what that looks like in a little while. And that bottom one is medical databases. So billing and claims databases have become a very interesting point for us because we're able to, in underwriting, glean information about the coded data, the way that individual physicians are getting paid, and have that on a case-by-case basis for an individual to see what they are being treated for. So quite a lot of data actually out there, but still growing dramatically. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we got into the state that we're in right now. In 2008, around 9–10% of hospitals actually had EHR systems installed, and less than half of office-based physicians were actually on electronic health record setups. This was actually considered a shovel-ready project. So this was, the government infused quite a substantial amount of money into bringing physicians and hospitals, these care providers, onto these systems, and basically through regulation has said that if you want to be paid for services with Medicare or Medicaid, that you actually need to be on electronic health record systems. You need to have tracking of some sort in order to do.
Hey Ernie, this is Josh Carter at the Merrill Lynch in Knoxville, Tennessee. How are you?
Oops, I'm sorry. Sorry to open my mouth.
Oh, are we okay? Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure if there was a question. By 2019, we went from quite a small amount of systems servicing a small population to actually being, today we sit at around 95%. We haven't, the last few years, we haven't had as much data in order to get a firm grasp on this, because there's a lag in terms of understanding, but we know that it ran up to about 95%. It's been pretty steady there. The holdouts in this space are care providers who operate on a cash-only basis and really don't care about taking certain insurances and being billed. Now, by 2019, if we go to the next slide, by 2019, there were over 1,100 separate software systems. This has dramatically decreased in the last handful of years. So at one point, the average hospital system, if you think about that, had 16 different vendors that they were using for different documentation purposes. And don't get me wrong, there are different services and providers that capture different points or parcels of the process. So some mental health systems tend to be designed very differently than an oncology system. Images tend to be kept in different places than the record. But 16 is a mess. This is a mess. And in the last handful of years, this has actually collapsed dramatically. So the last number that I saw places the number of EHR systems in market in the low hundreds. So around 300. I think that it's gonna, even that, it'll collapse. The market just won't support that, right? Because the same time that all of this is going on, we have further regulation coming in and saying your systems need to be able to communicate with each other. We need to be able to exchange information, and it has been determined that the patient owns their information and needs to be able to have access to it. Because there was a debate very recently as to whether or not you owned your own medical information, or the doctor owned it, or the software provider owned it. And to me, that's absolutely wild that that was a debate, but it absolutely was. And so regulation has stepped in and said, okay, we get it, it's a mess. Now we need to collapse down. Now, where do we slot into this as an industry? The first contract for direct release EHR access was signed the week of Thanksgiving in 2018. And I know because I got the text message, I was on a beach in Mexico when it happened, and I was super excited. We didn't actually get data flowing through until 2019. And so it might seem like you've heard about this for a long time. It might seem painful, but I have to tell you that this has moved unbelievably fast. We've gone from nothing in the box, 0 on the other side, to hit rates that are consistently in the 30% range for direct release EHR. And that's actually quite traumatic for an industry like like ours, which tends to actually move slowly. But what we have bumped up against is all of this other pain that I just described to you, right? The run up, the explosion of the use of these systems, and then the slow collapse back towards consistency and regulation and output of this information. The original systems were designed for continuity of care, security, for billing of services, for proper keeping of records. Listen, when I first started underwriting, I had doctors come to me and tell me my basement flooded. I don't have any records on this person anymore because they were sitting in boxes in their basement, right? That's not the way that we can function going into the future. Paper records in your doc's basement. So it needed to happen. The problem was that the systems weren't originally designed for that communication cross-platform, and they certainly weren't designed for us. Full stop. They were not designed for the insurance industry to use that information to underwrite. And so, we're a hitchhiker along for this ride, really retrofitting these services or this data, this information into our world, because there's a dramatic cost and time savings once we get this right. Dan, you can grab the next slide. So, access was the original issue, and we're the aggregators, Happy and MIB and Claretto, they're crushing it, right? They have their roadmaps, they're driving forward, they're aggregating this data. We're going to see the hit rates skyrocket in the next couple of years. And now we're thinking about how do we handle the lack of standardization? How do we handle the fact that we were accelerated dramatically in the last couple of years because we needed to have access to this information because in-person labs and exams were not readily available. And on top of that, asking the question of ourselves, we need to be easier to do business with, and we know that this is one of the ways that we can do that. Here at Swiss Re, and this is not an advertisement for what we're doing, but just to let you know the kind of our focus, we are looking at that usability space, right? So the lack of standardization is being solved on the regulatory side for the health space. And then we are able to leverage our partnership with a company called Diameter Health in order to get that data normalized and deduped and enriched. We'll show you a record here in a second. You can see how long some of these records actually are. And then being able to take Swiss Re's superpower of underwriting and risk knowledge assessment and apply that so it becomes very usable for the carriers and for the end users and for the underwriters. And so they're not kind of slogging through these endless digital records. So that's the focus right now. This is kind of where we came from, how we got here, where we're focused, and why we're focused on that delivery. And that, again, is dramatic cost savings, dramatic reduction in cost savings when we get this right, as well as improved turnaround time. We'll take a quick look at a record here, and then I'm going to take a sip of water and a deep breath and let you guys hit me with all of the heartache and hardship. So the next image, this is a patient portal record. So this is essentially what would be scraped from a patient portal. If you went in and you put in your username and password for Human API, and you can actually go do this right now. You download the app right to your phone, and you can go search for your doctors, pull your records in, and create your own health locker. You don't need anything special to do it. You can do it right now. And when a username and password is entered correctly, a record is pulled back, and this is very typical of what that record would look like. Now, this is 2 of 40 pages, right? So this report is substantial, but it's separated and organized into a fashion which is relatively neat and easy to read. So that's a patient portal style record which has been pulled. We'll also show you a full quote unquote electronic health record. So
let's go back. Wait,
Sure.
Go back for 1 second,
Yep.
because I know there's people that are listening to this, and I just want to point this out because this is going to be a crux of a lot of this conversation. If you look at this record, you will see just very much detail about the person's active problems, the resolved problems, the immunizations, the results of tests that have been done, procedures that have been done, a past medical history. You see a lot of detail in this report, okay? And this happens to be a human API report. And it's going to be vastly different from what you're going to see in the next report. And it's important that you guys know this, because this is part of the issue of what's coming in to the carriers and what we're talking about. And Nicole is really emphasizing about not only standardizing these records, but having a company that's coming in and basically gathering all this information and making it interpretable by the underwriters at the carriers. Okay, so go to the next one.
Yeah, Diana, if you don't mind, just to kind of reiterate that, because I know we've got some folks that are listening, and it's a simple index essentially of your current medication, active problems, resolved, immunizations. Like, this is very put together and simple to read.
It is.
Just,
But-
you know,
but-
somebody's
but what-
listening in, they might not be able to see that, but I mean, it's what we want, right?
Yeah, and Human API does a really nice job at the human readable output. I would say in terms of the vendors, they are currently doing the best job of organizing the output and presenting it for use. It's quite good.
And do you notice what's missing from it? Okay, so be very clear that the difference between a lot of these are going to be missing doctors' comments on visits.
Diana, Jeff has a comment too. So Jeff, if you want to jump
I
in
was
too.
waiting for that one.
So this is not a human API problem, more of all the doctor's office problems. And I've seen it over and over and over again, but they never take off active problems. They just don't ever put that in the resolved column, and there's no dates or anything of when they get put in there. And so we have tons of medical records constantly with active problems showing from their last visit, but it was something from like 10 years ago.
You are 100% correct, Jeff. Well, let's pick that up. Don't let go of that.
So I'm just wondering if there's any, you know,
Are you saying you're
solution
seeing that in your
in-
EHR records that you're looking at?
You,
What was that?
you have,
Yeah. Jeff, you see that in EHR records that you see?
yeah, I just got one and I'm like in the midst of been working on it for months and months, because there's things from 2014 that are still sitting there and now
Mhm.
trying to get the doctor to fix it. Even when I go to my doctor, I'm like, hey, there's like 5 things in here. These things are from like 5 years ago, but they're just
Yeah.
listed as, you know, issues. I'm like, can you take them off? No, we can't take them off. I'm like,
Yeah, once it's entered into the record. I think, you know, one of the things that we need to crack, right, is creating that kind of longitudinal view of the record, right? The extract as it comes out of, because this is the human readable view, but a lot of the work we do is with that raw data behind the scenes, right? You're not necessarily seeing all of the codes and all of the, like, the nasty stuff that sits behind. And combining that, not just with EHR, right, but saying, okay, cool, I also have your prescription record. And I can start to bounce these things off of each other. And how do we create a more useful view of the applicant? Because to your point, obviously these things are going to resolve, right? There must be a resolution, and it's just carrying through time after time after time, right? It's kind of just, it's like a glitch in the matrix. It's waste in the system in the record.
and Jeff,
So
I want to
one
hit
of the challenges.
forward. I want to bring that up to you, how it's affecting underwriting. So, because that's really important, and that really applies to everyone on this call. But Nicole, show the next record.
Yeah. So let's pop to the next one. So this is a 217 page record. So this is the type of record we would expect to see with a HIPAA authorization, right? So authorized release. This is pulled like we would pull an APS, meaning you go out and you search for the actual applicant, and then a record gets pulled down. So you can give it a scroll. We don't want to sit here. It's a real record, so we don't want to expose anything that we shouldn't be exposing, but it'll give you kind of a sense of the laundry list of things, right?
Yeah, this is great. It beats the handwriting of a doctor.
That's
Doesn't
a
it?
very important point to all of us, Isaac. I brought that up to Nicole yesterday.
Yeah. Sure.
And also, I've looked at my record, at Scripps, and it was fantastic. It tells you the doctor comments, what do you went in for? Then it gives you the comments. However, the gentleman earlier, I believe Jeff is right. There were medication I haven't taken for years. And I said, so that what the doctor made a comment has been removed. He didn't say that, he cannot remove it, but he made a comment that, patient hasn't been taking this medication since whatever.
Yeah,
So
and if you actually,
you can have your record if there's a problem. I mean, if the case is preferred, super preferred, who cares? But if the insured is getting a pushback and they see the record and they go back to the doctor, they can not remove it, but put that they haven't taken this certain medication.
yeah, if you look at the medication list here, you'll see the status section. So keep scrolling.
Besides, don't you
So
go
you'll see
get
the
the
active
Yes, they
versus
do get the
continued
RX.
therapy, right? So
yeah,
you can
but you get a prescription reading also, don't you? So you can see if the patient been buying those medications or not.
Right, you can see what's been prescribed and you can see what's been filled, right? Because when we're looking at the RX history, it's fills, it's at the fill level. So this is like super interesting, but you see the status here, right? Where in this particular system, when it's over, they're able to change that status from active to a completed or a discontinued therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just gotta get real close to it, that's all.
And it's like, it's data, this data is as good as the person who inputs it. And this is, so not a challenge in our market, but Dan and I work with teams all over the globe on EHR projects. And our colleagues in China have a challenge where the doctors, typically you're seen in a hospital and you're seen for a very short period of time. So there are these EHR systems that you can tap into, but there's not a lot in them. It's like a couple of check boxes and usually no commentary. So, we have a bit of an overload of data, but I'd rather be in our position and be figuring out how to mine that and get through that than be in their position where they're really trying to use, predictive modeling and behavior and wellness and all of these other things to fill in the gaps for their clients, because the EHR records don't really contain much of anything because the doctors are just, cranking through people. They don't have the time to do the documentation.
Okay, so let me understand this. I'm buying insurance and I send my HIPAA, hand it to the insurance company. Through that HIPAA, you could actually go to the hospital or how are you going to get my medical record? That's what I want to understand.
Yeah.
I have to give you the code and the password to my medical record?
No, so with the signed HIPAA, we are able to query one of the electronic health record providers that are available to us and search for your name. We do an address and a name search, right? Your signed release. And we would be able to pull back all of your records that are active or all of your records for your active providers, right, that are on those networks. So right now we have access to the largest EHR providers in the market. So Epic, Paradigm, Cerner, Practice Fusion, NextGen, as well as the health information exchanges, which exchange these records at the state level. We don't yet have we don't have the network complete. So that's what we're working on. But yeah, we can use your HIPAA authorization that we would obtain an APS with. And that same authorization will get us access to your EHR record.
Okay, for how long?
Sorry, are we currently doing that?
Yes. Okay. So yes. And that's why I said this is going to come full circle to what's happening in underwriting. Because the process that is happening right now is, we've talked for a couple of weeks up until today about all the electronic processes, starting from the electronic submission and then going to the accelerated underwriting. And now here we are about the data that we're getting from APSs. All of the carriers are, if they're using some sort of accelerated underwriting and or they're doing a submission with electronic process, they are ordering your APS records, okay? They have a HIPAA, and they are, depending upon the carrier, automatically going out to multiple ones that she said to try and find your records with that authorization. The only one that you really need to actually authorize and go in and actually release is human API, or if your doctor is specifically using this. So in the background of all this time, when the insurance companies now are saying, look, we want these cases to go through faster. We don't want agents to wait months, and we want them to go through cheaper and not spend, a lot of money on these records. We're getting enough data through our XCheck, claims check, and these APS records. They have been doing this in the background, which is kind of why a lot of you have now full forward come back, and I've had to come back to you and say, well, there wasn't enough information in that record that they got directly, and I need to now come back and get more information from you to clarify something that's been repeated for 20 years in somebody's record, or to clarify perhaps, that there's no chart notes and I have to go back and get APS records. So yes, this has all been going on, and it is going to become even more so moving forward on your small cases, big cases. I've been on 3 board calls in the last 2 weeks, and the carriers are pretty much saying we want to, do as few APSs as possible. And if we're doing APSs, this is how we want to go. And of course, I want to control that information. So I have to be on board with all of these so that I can get these records. So for those of you that want us as a BGA to be submitting your cases, I have to be able to see these.
So Diana, it sounded like you just said 2 things. One is you can get all these records electronically with a HIPAA form, but then you said except the human API, which is pretty much all the records. So I'm a little confused at what you just said.
I can clarify.
There's 4 different platforms, but
yeah, I can clarify that. So some carriers are seeing the value in trying to obtain it with Patient Portal, right? With that username and password. And other carriers have said that's too intrusive for the client. We're just going to do this HIPAA release method. So you have the option, carriers have the option to do either. And actually, I owe Diana an email to introduce her to an individual so that she could look at that direct release method as well, right, for your needs. So it's an either or situation. It's not that, and if you think back to the chart that went left to right, Patient Portal sits on top of EHR. The HIPAA goes directly and gets it from the EHR. The Patient Portal is out here, right? So if you have a Patient Portal, you have an EHR, I can get it with your HIPAA authorization. There's some value in just allowing the carrier or the applicant to be able to control it and try and get it very, very quickly, because it comes back in seconds. The Patient Portal, if you get a hit, it comes back in seconds. So that's very attractive. So, the flow of first I try Patient Portal. If that doesn't work or they can't find their doctor, we get the authorization signed, and then we go do our searches through all of the EHRs and HIEs. They all work. They're all pieces of the puzzle together. Does that help? That felt a little wordy.
Yeah, I was just trying to. I understand. So, yes.
So Jeff,
There's not different information. It's the same exact information. It's just a matter of the patient if the patient's willing to push a few buttons and go through the username and password if they have them and give them to us through the human API, then we get them very quick. If we don't do it that way, then Total can't get those medical records, but the insurance companies are, or maybe they can once you introduce Diana to whoever you want to introduce her to. But otherwise, the insurance companies are sometimes getting that information themselves, which could be the same information. Right now, rather than doing a regular APS and getting these companies to go out and photocopy records, taking a month or 2.
Correct. And think of it in your own use, because if you, like with mine, for instance, at UCLA, I have to go in and you have to hit a box that says you allow them to release the records. So that's what this is all about. I have to actually go into my portal at UCLA or Providence and allow them to release records. That's one way of doing it. Or the companies are going in with their HIPAA and it comes in at two different levels. So it's really important that when you guys are talking to your clients and you're setting this up from the very beginning and you're going through this electronic process, that you query your clients and think of your own personal use, because a lot of you have done this with your doctors already. You know, what are you doing with your doctors? Are you signed up with a portal? Are you already, looking at your records online? Because a lot of you deal with, older age people. And believe me, if they're like my parents, they're not signing up for these portals, so and that might be a little bit of a challenge for you. And then we have to go back and hopefully try and hit it through an APS or other ways. So it is a part of the conversation you should be having upfront with your clients so that you're prepared to know, what path we're going down.
Are they buying
Do you
insurance?
think this is more like, as we take an app, if we know X, Y, and Z criteria are hit, whether it's an older client or we know that there's a couple prescriptions, something along those lines, that we just introduce this at the time that we take the application, let them know about this AI process, and that's when we should address this now, not waiting until we've submitted an application, we've got an initial review by a case manager or whatever. We should get this up front. This is what we should be teaching our agents. Okay, all right.
Yes. You want to keep going?
No, that's perfect.
Okay, so Nicole, you're done.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep
Where,
bringing
yeah.
this full forward. So she started off by saying this is a journey, right? This started a few years ago. And what this comes down to, each and every single one of the doctors in the hospitals and what those doctors are willing to release. There are many doctors that actually will not agree, even though they're sitting there typing while you're there, to release the chart notes. That's not going to be part of the record. And if you've been doing underwriting with me for a very long time, you know that the chart note and the doctor's opinion about what's happening with the patient is very important. So this is a healthcare provider issue more than it is a insurance carrier issue, because it starts there, right? They have to put in the information. The next step is it gets to the carrier, and then the carrier has to say, okay, we're getting 200 and something pages of records. And, if it's something like Kaiser, it's repeated over and over and over again. So they now need to hire another company or have an in-house somebody that's going to sit there and review those records and do a summary of those records, so that somebody doesn't have to sit there and actually go through each page. So the challenge to the carriers has been, okay, now we're getting this data and we're getting these records. How are we going to interpret it? Okay. And my biggest thing, and I'm putting this forward to you because this is what comes up, is, we submit the stuff and then it comes back to us and I have to come back to you and ask you for additional information because it wasn't in the digital record. And then you're like, well, why did I do this process? If it's not going to work, and I have to go back and get the records. So the journey is the carriers are trying to figure out a way to interpret the records and train the underwriters to read this and compare the data that's coming in the APS record to the data that they're getting through prescription checks, through claims data that's coming in, lab pictures of, people actually looking at labs. So it's just like this whole cross-reference, but it's evolving so quickly. I mean, I'm literally telling you, when we turned this on in 2019, we had like no hits. Like, I don't know if it's an
Sure.
LA thing specifically, because it
There
is
was
different
no
by state,
coverage. There was no California coverage there. That is absolutely true.
right? So
Yeah.
it's a problem. It took a long time for California doctors and hospitals to adopt this procedure. So it has taken a huge step forward, you know, especially, and I think same thing in the insurance world, but because of COVID, you know, this is what's happened in the medical industry, is that they've been forced to catch this up as quickly as we had to on the insurance side.
Hey, Diana, can you talk about best practices for, you know, which of these carry the, you know, Corretto human API, where they get them, how they sign up, what they need to do on the front end? Can we, a little discussion around that as well?
Well, the only, I almost want to let Nicole answer this.
Go ahead.
You know, so right now, like Total Financial is using Corretto and Human API, and soon probably MIB. So the Human API is the one that you need the authorization. The client needs to actually authorize their doctor to release those records. Okay, that's on their side, and the rest of them, we already have the HIPAA. It's a very simple process. Actually, we send the HIPAA to our copy service, and the copy service actually goes and grabs the electronic record. And it's an immediate notification to us, whether it's a hit or a non-hit. So there's really not much for you guys to do at all, unless it's someone that has that specific portal where they have to authorize it or release it. And I think we're trying to really get away with that. And that's why we've used all these other companies to be able to grab those records.
Yeah. I'll expand a bit here as well. You know, Diana, you were talking about the doctor's reluctance to share information in some instances. And that's a big deal. It's a big challenge in the healthcare space. And it's something that, you know, when we're pulling records as an industry, we're suffering from that, right? Like, we're as good as the data that they're entering and they're willing to share. There are strides being made in that world, in the healthcare space, for more access. So on an individual level, in terms of managing your own health, or if you have family members, friends that, you know, you're with them on their healthcare journey, this is going to be more and more and more and more common, that idea of owning your own record, right? And we'll see this in the coming years with our applicants in the insurance space, is that they're going to have these kind of data lockers, right? Where they'll be able to have a central resource for all of their healthcare information. That's something all of us individually have access to today. It's just not as widespread, but there will always be some protected areas of information where we will have gaps, where we will either have to try to order traditional records or find a different way to get a view. And mental health, specifically psychiatric records, is the space that is hyper protected. So when we talk about, you know, physicians being hesitant with notes, in terms of mental health, the systems where the data is actually captured by, if you're with your psychiatrist, that it's like completely separate. You would not get access to that. So there are certain protected classes of information that we know that we'll always have challenges with. You know, as an individual consumer of healthcare, I hope that makes you feel a little better, that there are things that will always be between you and your doctor, and only you and your doctor, that will require extra levels of protection. But, you know, as an individual in an industry who needs those records to proceed, obviously these are challenges. So it is getting better, a lot better. And I think we're going to see substantial improvement in the next few years as the technology gets better and easier for physicians as well.
A quick question. There is a federal mandate at this time and for the future that these records to be 100% electronic?
In order for care providers to receive payment from Medicare and Medicaid, they need to have a compliant electronic health record system.
Okay. So pretty much all hospitals have it.
Yeah, unless they're working in a cash-only environment,
Okay.
they're going to have a system that is compliant.
How about the 300 vendors that you talked about? I mean, it'd be nice to be centralized a little more so computers could talk to one another. If there's an issue at this time with the 300 vendors that need to be shrank a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, their systems need to be certified compliant at their level as well. And it's one of the reasons why we're seeing that collapse. Those few hundred vendors, I think it'll collapse down further and further. Just a couple of years ago, that was 600, right? So the collapse has been dramatic. They need to be compliant. They need to be able to exchange information. And they know that if they're going to grow, they have to be able to do certain things, right? That's just, again, unless you're existing in a cash-only environment or you're catering to a very niche audience, or in terms of healthcare. So it will, I think the industry will benefit from some of those systems coming together. Also, just at a business level, some of those systems they're selling off or giving away what they've created, because you're only going to make so much if let's say you onboarded 3 customers, right? You're not going to get these massive health systems unless they're the giants like Epic.
Well, Nicole, it's not the hospitals. I sit on a board of a hospital.
Yeah.
I remember doctors coming in and some of them have different systems.
Yeah.
And is not talking to one another. So I'm concerned about the doctors, because the average person is not hospitalized. The average person sees a dermatologist, sees a general practitioner, orthopedic, whatever, internist. That's who I want for those systems to talk to one another. Has that been resolved at this time? Because I stopped listening a while ago. Not to you, to the hospital and to the doctors.
So the information blocking and the interoperability rules and regulation that's been passed is addressing those concerns, right? The idea is that the systems that they all operate in have to output information in a standardized format that is recognized by another system so that they can talk to each other.
Is that happened already, or is going to happen?
It is happening.
It's still a problem though. It's not there.
It's not 100% resolved, but every month it gets a little better. The health information exchanges tried to solve that on the state level, but they're kind of poorly funded. Some of the technology is a little janky, right? So I think the goal is to have it resolved in the next 3 to 4 years, where all these systems would be interoperable. Everybody is able to talk to each other. Everybody's able to get consistent information. So it's been solved in some pockets, but not in all.
So Isaac, like UCLA does not, like you can have all your doctors at UCLA, you can have 5 doctors at UCLA, you can see all those doctors. But if I have 3 doctors at Providence, they do not connect. Okay.
Yes.
So that's like a problem, because that's exactly what you're talking about. But they are developing, a way to make them connect just the same way that the insurance companies do. And, I want to make sure that you guys really clearly understand this, because when I say this is happening in all your cases, and especially if you're going to be doing, small cases and you're doing the electronic submission, if you're going to be doing your cases and you're doing large cases with me, if you're doing $100 million case, 50, 10, 20, 30, I'm still going to try and go after these records. Okay. I'm going to try and get this, because I still want to save time for you guys. I obviously don't want to spend 6 weeks going to get an APS.
Right.
So, Max, I mean, just repeat what you just said to me, because, it needs to be heard by underwriting, and it needs to be heard by her.
Where I was going was, I mean, this won't replace the relationships like you, Diana, have, or like we have with you. When we look at a certain case, we get presented with a certain case, and we know, all right, that's going to have a better response from this carrier because their MD has a cardiac background, or like something that intuitive that this isn't going to get accomplished by that, but this will give us a much better background or a better idea of where to place that case or where we can take it to.
It will give us the general information. It will let me decide, whether or not I have enough information to, present it to the carrier, or do I need more information?
And it'll be already in that format that works and is appropriate for the carriers, which I think is a bigger deal than, us doing field underwriting in the past where we get X and Y, but we only got half a Z. And now we got to go back, and it became counterproductive, where this gives us a real format that we can transition to you and then seamlessly to whichever carrier underwriter might be appropriate. In terms of how to communicate this to a client, though, without getting into a conversation with them about best practices or getting too in-depth into the underwriting process, scaring them off or just irritating them, do we have something that, like a link or maybe a brief explanation, something that we can send to clients, the ones that we deem appropriate, right? For them to click on, understand what and why they're filling or signing up for this portal to gather their records, that it's going to be a quicker process. It'll be hopefully less invasive for them if they do it this way. Do we have anything like that? Or am I jumping ahead too much?
So
No, you're not.
Human API has worked on material on a carrier by carrier basis. So that request to this point has been driven by the carriers.
Okay.
So Human API has put some material together. I mean, Diana, I don't know if you've had those same conversations with Happy about that, but I think we need to answer your question. There's some of it, we need a lot more of it, because the flow through rate in terms of convincing people is still around 30%, and it could be higher, right? We could take
Well, and that's
more
exactly what I figured, that was the flow rate. And that was what I was hoping we could, us as a smaller group even, work towards changing, because we can position this as producers where, because we are part of that, we have this relationship, whether it's with Total or with Human API. If you fill this out, potentially we're going to accomplish whatever that goal involving life insurance is, right? This much quicker, or it'll be this much less invasive. I mean, as producers, we can present that in a way that really kind of pats ourselves on the back. We can word that appropriately. I was just trying to think of how, without getting into the weeds, medically speaking, with a client, how do we present this and get them to willingly create that portal, say that they do want to go through this process without it wasting, and being candidly, just hours of our time, because now we're trying to pretend like we're a pediatrician or whatever it might be.
It's there. It's there. A matter of fact, unfortunately, when I first announced this, it is carrier by carrier. The carriers have created, sheets that can be used that you can give to your clients, where they give an explanation of what they're doing and what they're going after. Like one of the first companies, John Hancock, did it in the very beginning when they came out with it. So it was something that we introduced probably about 2 years ago. And now that this has become, so ingrained in every way that we're doing business today, it's probably something that, I should not only look at with every carrier to see if, what they have, but yes, it should be something that you should be able to present to your client so that they are aware, just like we have a cheat sheet for a phone interview, right? Of, how to, conduct a phone interview.
Diana, I have a question here. If the client's sophisticated enough and tech savvy, are they capable of emailing you the record? They can go to the portal and just send you everything they got on the records?
I know I could do that. Like I can download my own records and, send them wherever I want. It just depends upon really the size and the amount that you're talking about.
Well, if you just email it, just email you, like I go to my record and I've seen those doctors and they have their notes and everything. I want to save time. I want to get my policy as soon as possible. I'll just email you everything I got.
Oh, you mean go back to like what we were doing before? Like just go get the records and email them to me?
Not go get the record. Email you my electronic records.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. I mean, I can always, the companies are going to accept that if I'm processing the case. Like, for instance, I'm doing an informal, you do that, you send that to me, I'm going to look at that and say, is this the right information? Is this
Right.
sufficient information? And yes, you can do that.
All right.
And
very
there's
good.
some places where you can actually go into your record and there's a share button,
Yeah.
share, and you can send it straight from your app on your phone.
I'm like your mom and dad. I wouldn't know how to do that, but I'm gonna learn. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just went onto my own record on the Mayo Clinic and I found share and link my accounts.
Oh, look at you.
Exactly. Yeah, well, he's Mr. Mayo.
Uh,
Come on, it's close.
You need a reputable clinic or something, though, don't you?
Exactly. This is one of those cash only clinics.
Well, this is Mayo of Tijuana. He didn't tell you that.
So I'm assuming that all of you, have some sort of experience with this, with your own doctors and maybe I'm wrong in assuming this, that you've seen what this looks like. Is this true for a majority of you, or is this like new knowledge to some of you?
Huh?
Well, you're all muted, so I guess I get that. Just gonna leave Isaac. Why? Eric, you maybe you'll say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got on my records at Cedars or UCLA to view my online records of if I had some labs done or something along those lines. But for clients, we always go through the process of just ordering the medical records, which, as you mentioned, as all of us know, is a pain in the ass and takes forever. I've asked clients to send from Kaiser or UCLA to go online and send us a copy. But when we send it to you, sometimes you mentioned it didn't include chart notes like you mentioned earlier on. And that was needed, but that wasn't showing up on their Kaiser portal. So then we have to go through the normal long process and wait 8 weeks for some reason just to get a copy of the records. So if there is an easier electronic way, then I mean that saves so much time and energy. That'd be great.
I think, like, especially for you, because you're so used to like going after and getting records and everything, and this new connection that Nicole's going to give me specifically that actually deals with Kaiser, it's going to be easier for all of you, because if you give me the opportunity to try and do the hit first on your clients to see if the records are available, that turns an informal submission from 3 months to 2 weeks, because I'm getting the record so fast and submitting it to the carrier. And that's really what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did that case in 7 weeks where, but the client called and told the doctor to release the records immediately when you guys ordered it. And I would love cases that only take 7 weeks with a $50K premium. That was great. But some of these cases just take forever. So especially if you can get it first, then I think that gives all of us a comfort level that it's not just an insurance company ordering every little bit and we don't know what they're looking at and why the person's getting a standard when we think they're very healthy. So if you can do that and receive the records immediately, I don't see a downfall with that.
That's a win-win. Hi, Jay.
Yeah.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for including me. I've been listening intently, and I want to back up for a minute because I want to get a big picture of this. First question I have is, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? Like, what is the purpose of getting all of these files electronically? Is it for the insurance carriers? Is it for the customer? Is it for the agent? Is it for everyone? Do we think this is going to be an easier, better way, less expensive, help the client? I mean, what's the bottom line?
I think you missed the beginning, but go ahead, Nicole, repeat.
Yeah, the bottom line is that it's faster, ultimately easier, and less expensive for underwriting. And everything
For
stands
everyone
out.
concerned, for the customer, for the agent, for the general agent, for everyone, right?
Yeah,
Okay, just
you're
wanted to be
happier
clear
if
on
you
that.
Yeah.
You're happier if you get the case done faster, right? Your client's happier if they get the
Right.
case done faster. The carrier is happier if they get the case done faster. The carrier is happier if they're saving thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of dollars for APS records, because then they can take that money and put it into product and whatever else they want to put the money into. So, you know, it was driven by the carriers to make the experience easier for the agent and the client.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. I'm really concerned about, because it's so new, because we're trying to do this and it's in its infancy, and we're all trying to get on the same page, trying to get the doctors on the same page, and insurance companies and the groups that are actually pulling these records. Number one, how accurate are the records that they're pulling? And number two is, as agents, it sounds like we're going to go say, hey, and I'm familiar with this for myself personally, my portal, my medical portal, and I've had a couple clients, and like others on this call, we've had the nightmare of saying we're going to do it electronically, having misinformation, and have to do it the old-fashioned way anyway, and go get the records anyway, and it's just like spinning our wheels. But just as important is I'm concerned about things falling through the cracks, me going to my client and say, hey, I want to do this portal thing. Next thing you know, there's wrong information, wrong underwriting. The underwriting is delayed. And next thing you know, the fact that that person, my client, dies, and that person's family is saying, hey, you're the agent, you recommended doing this, and guess what? We're suing you for, you know, it taking so long because of this new process.
Ah, the claims information.
I'm just thinking of the liability exposure.
Where do you want me to start in my response? This is information that is entered into an electronic health record system directly by your physician, right? If the information is inaccurate, the applicant is able to, again, and we've heard on this call already today, people have looked at their own records and seen information that was carried over by their, by their physicians. I mean, there's a point in which it becomes a conversation between the applicant and the physician. We have controls in place to make sure we're pulling the right records, right? That we have authorized release, that we're searching and retrieving the record for the correct individual, or that would be a data breach. But in any medical record, there's elements of potential inaccurate capturing, right? Even in an APS.
Yeah, no different. I mean, we have the same liability in an APS. The APS record is the APS record. The only difference is it's digital now. Okay. I'm not reading someone's handwriting. It's just in a computer.
Yeah. It's not being printed out and then collated with other stuff and then, like hand curated and then faxed, which still happens, right? So, so it's not derived data. In that way, it's pulling from the source of truth where the physician has actually, or care provider has entered the information for the care they've completed.
Yeah, but when you have a third party going after the information and summarizing it and then sending it to you, then there's kind of like whisper down the lane.
I see what you're saying. So, so the summarization of the data and that kind of usability of the data is actually the area that a lot of companies are working on right now. For that reason, we want to make sure that summaries are accurate, that the underwriter always has access to any underlying data that they can drill into. But there is quite a bit of deduplication that has to happen because a lot of the information carries over and over and over, and 1,000 pages is not manageable. But yeah, I mean, the tools, the summarization tools, they are going through their paces right now to make sure that the right information is being surfaced. But the source information is always available to the underwriter ultimately. And one of the problems that we have is that underwriters, are often overly cautious and want to look at all of that anyway. And and they're going to go and they're going to dig through that record and make sure that that summary, while they feel it might be useful, isn't the complete picture, and they want to be able to read it for themselves with their own eyes, right? So the tools are being built in a way where you wouldn't lose the full visibility, but you would be presented with a snapshot to direct your attention as an underwriter to the right spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it does. It's trying to kind of save some time and energy, knowing that don't go after this because this doesn't make any sense. Go after this because this is going to impact the file.
Right.
I know that we're coming to the end of this, so I just want to really quickly say, look, the carriers are still getting the data. They chose to accept this data. So this isn't something that you can lie about or it's your fault. If they're choosing to work with a vendor that's doing the interpretation and its interpretation is right or wrong, I'm just using this as an example. This is their relationship, okay? It's not like a client's giving wrong information. It's their claim. Nothing's changed. What you want is you want the availability, and you want each carrier to be able to come back to an agent or BGA like me to say, hey, I need clarification of this. Or if somebody says to me, I found this in a record, and you come back and go, no, that's not true. That was like 30 years ago. I don't have that anymore. That's where you want to be able to have that interaction with the carrier. But in the end, it's their claim. They've gotten the records that they've asked for and that they've gone after. So I know we're just past the hour mark. Just real quickly, like she said, this is a journey. This is going to continue, but it's greatly depending upon the doctors, the hospitals, what they're allowing to be sent in, and how that information is being obtained. Total is there trying to get every platform that we can to get these records so that we can make this easier and faster for you. Some of the carriers will keep the records if they're ordering them. They won't release them to us. That's this property information thing that's going on. So if we have to shop a case, we might have to go after it again. It's a whole nother conversation. But this is your future. This is what is coming down the pipeline. And this is just something you have to prepare your clients for and have the conversation up front. And if anybody wants to talk to me offline afterwards or send me an email about asking for that form, and so that Max, I can send it to you about handing it to your client and saying, this is what they're going after, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Or even the options. If it's like, here are 2 options that we can get it faster, and just a little snippet about it and how to do it 1, 2, 3, that'd be great. Because anything that's you're paying somebody to go to make an appointment with the doctor's records department that goes then to make copies, then fax it. It's just an extremely archaic procedure that wastes all of our time.
Very true.
I kind of echo Max said earlier, we have the control of the client. The client, we're doing something the client wants. The client wants life insurance, and we're saying we're going to try to get this as fast as we can. We've employing some new techniques that are trying to streamline this. This is the future. What we're going through right now is just the growing process, the growing pains as it results itself. It will work eventually. I remember a meeting, it was at the top of the table or $1 million round table. Somebody from some insurance company said, eventually, in the not too distant future, we're going to be able to go to lunch with a client, pull out our laptop, punch in a few things, and over the course of that lunch, they will check the driver's license, the prescription record, they'll get the electronic medical records. At the end of your lunch, you'll have a decision. If you had a portable printer, you could print the policy. So, that's what's coming. And this is just part of the process. We're in control of it. I think if we have forms that are part of our packet that say, sign all these forms, and one of them is also the authorization. Well, we explain what all the forms are. It's the authorization electronically to get records. It's going to speed up the process. we're in control. We can spin this as being very positive as to what we're doing to get this done the fastest. So it's what we're going through. It's the way it is.
Yes, thank you. Good, beautiful way to end and
Absolutely.
summarize. So I
All right.
want to thank everybody.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Diana, you're right on. Thank you, everyone. These sessions are super important, right? We get a chance to connect, we get a chance to listen, we get a chance to talk about the future. And so, you know, with a huge thank you on my end, the team at Swiss and Diana, we just want to say thanks for the time, everyone. We do have one more left, and we're going to be really focusing on that large case and the jumbo case, and then some of the other future enhancements coming. So that you'll get another communication on. So with that, I want to thank everyone and enjoy your day.
Thank
Thank
you very
you, guys.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Diana. Thanks,
Thank you.
Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys,
TJ.
for being here. Appreciate it.
Talk to
Take care.
everyone soon.
Bye, Igor.